Welcome to Stories Junction. Let's begin today's story. I don't know exactly when it happened, when Olivia stopped being the woman I married. Maybe it was gradual, a slow fade, little moments I ignored because I didn't want to see what was right in front of me. Maybe it had always been there, hidden beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to emerge. But that night, as I sat across from her at the dinner table, I knew. It was an ordinary Friday evening, nothing special. I had just finished cooking a simple meal of grilled salmon with roasted vegetables, one of her favorites. The scent of garlic and rosemary lingered in the air, the kind of smell that used to bring her into the kitchen with a smile. But not tonight. Tonight, she barely noticed. She sat at the kitchen counter, her phone in hand, scrolling, typing, scrolling again. A faint smile played on her lips, a private, knowing smile. And it wasn't for me. I set her plate down in front of her, keeping my tone light. What's funny? She barely looked up. The smile, I said, nodding toward her phone. Oh, nothing. Just talking to Julia. Julia was her best friend. That wasn't unusual. I picked up my fork and started cutting into my food. What's she up to? For just a second, Olivia hesitated. It was subtle, a tiny pause, but I caught it. She's having a birthday party tonight. I nodded. That's nice. Then, too quickly, she added, it's at Nathan's place. I stopped mid-chew. My fork hovered over my plate before I slowly set it down. I'm sorry, whose place? She let out a long sigh, already exasperated. Nathan's. She glanced up at me, irritation flashing in her eyes. You know my ex. A slow, cold anger settled in my chest. You can't be serious. She rolled her eyes, stabbing at her vegetables with her fork. Ryan, it's not what you think. I folded my arms. Then explain it to me. Julia's birthday just happens to be close to Nathan's. They're still friends, so they decided to throw the party together. It has nothing to do with him. I let out a short, humorless laugh. That's the best you've got? Julia could have had her party anywhere, but somehow it just has to be at your ex's house. She dropped her fork onto her plate with a sharp clatter. I knew you'd act like this. Like what? I leaned forward, my voice steady but firm. Like a husband who doesn't want his wife drinking at her ex's place? She groaned, rubbing her temples like I was exhausting her. Oh my God, Ryan. It's just a party. I don't care about Nathan. Then why are you so determined to go? Her lips pressed into a thin line. Because it's Julia's birthday, and I'd look like a bad friend if I didn't show up. I studied her, letting the silence stretch between us. If you go, we're done. She let out a short, disbelieving laugh. You're being ridiculous. I didn't blink. I'm serious, Olivia. You walk out that door tonight, you're walking out of this marriage. Her expression hardened. You don't get to tell me what to do. I clenched my jaw. No, I don't. But I do get to decide what I'll tolerate. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. Nothing is going to happen, Ryan. I'll even text you throughout the night if that makes you feel better. I don't need your texts. I need a wife who respects our marriage. She scoffed, pushing her plate away like the conversation was beneath her. I'm going. You're overreacting. I sat back in my chair, nodding to myself. Okay, Olivia, do whatever you want. And she did. She got up from the table, grabbed her phone, and walked away. I heard her footsteps down the hall, the faint rustling as she got ready in the bedroom. I sat at the table, staring at the empty seat across from me. I wasn't mad. Not yet. Because deep down, I already knew. I knew that the moment she stepped into Nathan's house, she wasn't my wife anymore. Minutes later, I heard the front door open. She left. She walked out of our home, out of our marriage, and straight into her ex's house. No hesitation. No second thoughts. No guilt. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I should have been angry. I should have felt betrayed. But I didn't. Instead, I felt something much worse. Nothing. The house felt different. Quieter. Colder. It wasn't just her absence. It was something deeper, something final. Like the warmth had been drained from the walls, leaving behind an empty shell of what used to be our home. For the first time in our marriage, I wasn't waiting for her to come home. I sat in the dim light of the living room, staring at my phone as the first text from her came in. Just got here. Everything's fine. I let my thumb hover over the screen for a moment. Then, without responding, I set the phone down. 5 minutes later, another text. People are just hanging out. Nothing crazy. Hope you're okay. Hope I'm okay. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head. Was she serious? Did she actually think I was sitting here waiting for updates, like some insecure fool? An hour passed. Another text. I promise it's not weird. Hope you're not mad. Mad? No. Done? Yes. I stared at the screen, at her words, at the sheer lack of awareness they carried. She had never actually considered what this meant for us. She thought this was just another argument, another disagreement that would blow over in a few days. She thought she could make this choice, walk out that door, and then come back to find me waiting, like nothing had changed. She was wrong. I stood up, slipping my phone into my pocket and grabbing my car keys. If she could do whatever she wanted, so could I. I wasn't going to sit here, staring at my phone, waiting for scraps of reassurance. If she thought she could make choices without consequences, she was about to learn that I could do the same. I got into my car, gripping the steering wheel tightly for a moment before pulling out of the driveway. I didn't know exactly where I was going, but I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't staying here. I didn't have a destination in mind when I pulled out of the driveway. I just drove. The streets of Portland were quiet, streetlights casting long shadows on the pavement. The hum of the engine filled the silence in my head, but it wasn't enough to drown out the storm brewing inside me. I wasn't angry, not in the way I probably should have been. No, this was something colder, something sharper. A realization. Olivia and I were done. The moment she chose to walk out of our house and into her ex's, she made that choice for us. She might not have realized it yet, but she would soon enough. I pulled into the parking lot of a small bar on the east side of the city. It wasn't the kind of place I normally went to, dimly lit, quiet, with a few scattered patrons nursing drinks alone. Perfect. Sliding onto a stool at the bar, I ordered a whiskey neat. The bartender, a guy in his mid-40s with a tired expression, poured it without a word. I took a slow sip, letting the burn settle in my chest. And then my phone buzzed. Olivia asterisk asterisk, still here, but I might leave soon. You up? Asterisk. I let out a humorless chuckle. You up? Like she was checking in after a casual night out with friends. Like she wasn't sitting in the home of the man she used to love, pretending it didn't mean anything. I didn't reply. Bad night. I turned to see a woman a few seats down, sipping from a glass of red wine. She had dark hair, loosely curled, and wore a fitted leather jacket over a simple black dress. There was something in her expression, curious but not prying. I smirked slightly, shaking my head. Something like that. She raised an eyebrow. Drinking alone in a quiet bar? Definitely sounds like a bad night. I studied her for a moment. She was beautiful, but not in an overly polished way. There was an edge to her, like she'd seen her fair share of bad nights too. You? I asked. Drinking alone? She smirked. Not for long, apparently. I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. Ryan. She clinked her glass lightly against mine. Carmen. We talked. Not about anything deep, just light conversation, small observations about the bar, the city, the way people always seemed to drink slower when they were sad. I didn't tell her about Olivia. I didn't tell her that. As we sat there, my wife was still at her ex's house. But somehow, I got the feeling she already knew. As the night stretched on, I felt something I hadn't in a long time. Freedom. Not just from Olivia, but from the weight of a marriage that had been dying for longer than I cared to admit. By the time I left the bar, it was past midnight. My phone buzzed again. Olivia asterisk asterisk, heading home now. Talk tomorrow. Asterisk. I stared at the message, then at the empty street in front of me. Talk tomorrow? There was nothing left to say. I slid my phone back into my pocket and started driving home. Not because I wanted to see her, but because I needed to end this for good. When I pulled into the driveway, the house looked the same as it always had. Warm light spilling from the windows, a quiet stillness hanging in the air. But it didn't feel like home anymore. I sat in the car for a moment, gripping the steering wheel, my jaw tight. Inside, Olivia would be waiting. Maybe she'd be drunk, maybe she'd already be asleep, but either way, she'd expect things to be the same. She had no idea. With a slow breath, I stepped out, locking the car behind me. The night was cold, but not as cold as the feeling settling in my chest. I wasn't walking into a conversation. I was walking into a decision. I pushed the door open. Olivia was sitting at the kitchen counter, a cup of coffee in front of her. She was still in the dress she'd worn to the party, her heels kicked off beside the chair. Her hair was slightly messy, like she'd just run her fingers through it, and when she looked up, I could see the hesitation in her expression. "Hey," she said, her voice careful, like she was testing the waters. I didn't respond right away. I walked past her to the fridge, pulled out a bottle of water, and took a slow sip before finally meeting her gaze. She frowned. "Where were you?" I raised an eyebrow. "Where was I?" I let out a short, humorless chuckle. "That's funny coming from you." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Ryan, come on. Don't do this." I set my water down. "Don't do what?" She sighed, rubbing her temple like she was already exhausted with me. "I know you're mad, but I told you. Nothing happened. It was just a party. I was with my friends." I leaned against the counter, studying her. "You were at your ex's house." She rolled her eyes. "So what?" "I didn't do anything wrong." A sharp, bitter laugh escaped me. "You don't even hear yourself, do you?" Her nostrils flared. "I don't know what you wanted to say." "I told you the truth. I told you I'd check in." "And I did." "Yeah, you did," I said coolly, like I was some babysitter you were reporting back to. "Not your husband." She exhaled sharply. "Jesus, Ryan, you're making this a bigger deal than it is." I pushed off the counter, stepping closer. "Am I?" "Because I think we both know that the moment you walked into that house, our marriage ended." She blinked, her body tensing. "Ryan." "No." I cut in, my voice steady. "You made a choice, Olivia. And now, I'm making mine." She stared at me, her mouth opening slightly, like she wanted to argue. But she saw something in my expression, something final. For the first time, real fear flickered across her face. She swallowed hard. "What are you saying?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, tapping the screen a few times before holding it up. A document filled the screen. Her eyes flickered down, scanning the words. And when she looked back at me, her face had gone pale. "Divorce papers." Her breath caught. You already?" "Yeah," I said simply. "I did." She stared at me like she didn't recognize me. Like she hadn't seen this coming. Like she hadn't already left long before tonight. I took a step back, my voice calm. "I'll be moving out in a few days. I'll have my lawyer send over the details." "Ryan." I didn't wait to hear what she had to say. I walked past her, straight to the guest room, and closed the door behind me. She could deal with the reality of what she'd done on her own. I was done waiting for her to figure it out. The silence in the house was suffocating. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that felt heavy, charged, like a storm waiting to break. Olivia hadn't knocked on the guest room door last night. I had half expected her to come in, to cry, to fight, to try and salvage whatever was left. But she didn't. Maybe she finally understood. Maybe she thought I was bluffing. Either way, it didn't matter. When I stepped out the next morning, Olivia was in the kitchen, staring blankly into her coffee cup. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her makeup was smudged under her eyes, her dress from last night still draped over a chair. The moment she heard my footsteps, her head snapped up. Her gaze locked onto mine. "You're really doing this?" I grabbed a mug from the cabinet, pouring myself some coffee, taking my time before answering. "I already did." She inhaled sharply, standing so quickly her chair scraped against the floor. "Ryan, this is insane. You're not even willing to talk about this? You're just, what?" Throwing everything away, I took a slow sip of coffee, letting her words hang in the air for a moment. Then I set my cup down and met her eyes. "You threw it away," I said evenly. Her mouth opened, but I kept going. "You made your choice the second you walked out that door last night." I shook my head. "Hell, probably long before that." She ran a hand through her hair, frustration radiating off her in waves. "Ryan, it was a party. That's it. I was with Julia. I wasn't doing anything wrong." I let out a humorless laugh. "Right? Just a party." She clenched her jaw. "You don't trust me." I studied her for a long moment. "I don't respect you." That stopped her cold. Her brows furrowed, something almost like hurt flashing across her face. "That's not fair." I tilted my head. "No. Tell me, Olivia, if the situation was reversed, if I went to my ex's house for a party, if I spent the night drinking and laughing while you sat at home wondering where you stood, would you be okay with that?" She shifted uncomfortably. "That's different." I scoffed. "Of course it is." She sighed heavily, rubbing her temples. Ryan, we can fix this. We can talk about it, go to counseling. I shook my head. I don't want to fix it. The words landed like a blow. She sucked in a sharp breath, her hands gripping the edge of the counter like she needed to steady herself. Ryan, she said, her voice quieter now. Please. I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling slowly. Do you even love me anymore? Her eyes widened. What? It's a simple question, I said. Do you love me? She hesitated, and that told me everything I needed to know. I nodded to myself. That's what I thought. She took a step forward, desperate now. Ryan, I do. You just what? I interrupted. You just got bored? You just stopped caring? You just wanted to see what you could get away with before I finally had enough. She swallowed hard. I never meant to hurt you. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's the thing, Olivia. You didn't even consider me enough to hurt me on purpose. I was just there. She looked like she wanted to argue, to fight, to plead, but she didn't. Instead, she just stood there, staring at me, realization slowly dawning in her expression. I finished my coffee, rinsed the cup in the sink, and grabbed my keys off the counter. I'll be staying at a hotel until I find a new place, I said. My lawyer will be in touch. She blinked rapidly, shaking her head. Ryan, please. Don't do this. We can fix it. I didn't look back. I walked out the door, feeling lighter than I had in years. Because I knew there was nothing left to fix. The hotel room was still, the kind of stillness that made the weight of everything feel heavier. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, my mind replaying the last conversation I had with Olivia. Not the screaming, not the accusations, not even the moment she realized she had lost everything. Just the quiet between her words, the space where regret should have lived but didn't. She didn't fight for us. Not really. She fought for control, for damage control, for the illusion of something salvageable. But love? No, that was long gone. And now so was she. My phone buzzed again. I already knew it was Olivia. For days, she had sent messages, long ones filled with desperate explanations, then short, clipped ones full of anger. Then came the silence. Now, her texts were sporadic. The realization was sinking in. She was beginning to understand that there was no coming back from this. I picked up the phone, skimmed the message. I miss you. I messed up. Please, can we just talk? I didn't reply. I let the phone drop onto the bed beside me and ran a hand down my face. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I just felt empty. The weight of everything, of the past, of the wasted years, of the slow decline, it was all settling into place. The moment she walked into Nathan's house that night, she had already made her choice. I just took longer to accept it. I exhaled, stood up, and grabbed my keys. I wasn't going to sit here in this hotel room, trapped in my own head. I needed air. I needed to move forward. The bar was dimly lit, tucked away from the noise of the city. I had been coming here more often than I cared to admit, not because I was drowning myself in alcohol, but because it was one of the few places where I didn't feel like I was walking through the ruins of my marriage. I pushed open the door, stepping inside. The familiar low hum of conversation, the clinking of glasses, the quiet murmur of music. It was a contrast to the deafening silence of my thoughts. And then there she was, Emma. She was sitting at the bar, casually stirring the ice in her glass, her auburn hair catching the glow of the hanging lights. There was something about her, something unforced, something real. She didn't know the details of my life, didn't pry, didn't push, and yet there was an ease to being around her that I hadn't felt in years. She glanced up and noticed me, offering a small smile. Back again? She asked. I smirked, sliding onto the stool beside her. Looks like it. She studied me for a second before tilting her head. Rough day. I let out a dry chuckle. Something like that. Let me guess. She tapped a finger on the bar. You finally signed the papers. I huffed. You make it sound like I won a prize. She shrugged. Freedom is a prize, isn't it? I didn't answer right away. I just stared at my drink, rolling the glass between my fingers. Was it freedom? I had spent so long fighting for something that, in the end, wasn't even worth the fight. Now that it was over, I wasn't sure how to feel. Emma shifted in her seat, resting her elbow on the bar. You don't look like a man who's celebrating. I scoffed. No. What do I look like? She studied me for a moment, then said, like a man who's trying to figure out who he is without her. The words hit harder than I expected, because she was right. For so long, my life had been tied to Olivia, to the marriage, to the arguments, to the constant push and pull of trying to make something work that was already broken. And now, without her, without the fight, without the exhaustion, what was left? Who was I now? I let out a slow breath. Yeah, I admitted. Something like that. Emma didn't say anything. She just nodded, as if she understood more than I had put into words. And maybe she did. For the rest of the night, we talked. Not about Olivia, not about the past, but about nothing and everything. It was easy, effortless. It was the first real conversation I had had in a long time, one that didn't revolve around proving my worth, one that didn't feel like an uphill battle. When I finally left the bar, the air was crisp, fresh, like the beginning of something new. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was leaving something behind. I felt like I was walking towards something better. A month later, the divorce was finalized. Olivia fought, of course. She didn't want to believe I was really gone. She begged, then threatened, then tried to manipulate her way back in. But it was too late. The house was mine. My assets were protected. She walked away with nothing. And me? I walked away free. I found a new place, a new rhythm, a new life. And Emma? She wasn't a replacement. She wasn't a rebound. She was just there, and that was enough. One evening, as I sat on my balcony, sipping a beer, my phone buzzed again. Olivia. I debated ignoring it like all the other times, but something in me decided to look. I still don't understand how you just let us go. I stared at the message for a long time. She still didn't get it. She had let us go a long time ago. I just finally caught up. I exhaled, closed the message, and blocked her number. Then I leaned back in my chair, took another sip of my drink, and let the past fade into the night. For the first time in a long, long time, I had no regrets.